If I had to venture a guess, I'd say the most visited historical period in all of gaming has to be World War II. Maybe this guess is a little biased due to my go-to genre of choice being first-person shooters, but I've definitely played a whole heap of games set during the Second World War. There were so many games set during this time period, in fact, that, well, people got a little sick of it, which makes sense when you've got series like Wolfenstein, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Medal of Honor all circulating around the early 2000s. Wolfenstein and the first Medal of Honor began in the 1990s, but you get the point. When you have multiple games based on the same event, I get why people could get sick of it, especially considering the games I just mentioned were just the big boys, and just first-person shooters, not other genres. But personally, I just can't get enough. World War II has always been a moment in history that I've enjoyed visiting in gaming, and so many of the games on this list, yeah, I've probably played them, which leads me to today's video. Brothers in Arms is a series of World War II first-person shooters focused on telling the events of the 101st Airborne Division, and a series that prides itself on realism, separating itself from the arcade-style games at the time like Call of Duty and Medal of Honor. As per usual, it seems though, my memory in regards to this series is foggy to say the least, and whilst I remember enjoying the games, I don't know why, or really what made this series stand out to me all those years ago. And well, that's why we're revisiting the series today, beginning, well, with the beginning. At release, Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 was a big success, both critically and commercially. But how does it hold up today? Is it worth your time revisiting, or does it just disappear into the masses of World War II shooters? Let's find out. I feel the need to also clarify this before we begin. Yes, Brothers in Arms is the next series of retrospectives, but we're only going to be talking about Road to Hill 30, Earned in Blood, and Hell's Highway, and not the mass amount of handheld and mobile games because, well, I don't want to play those entries particularly, and I believe most of them are just portable games for the main entries anyway. Just figured I'd clear that up before we progress. Okay, enjoy. For a 5 to 6 hour game, Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30's story is a lengthy one to describe, if only because of the fact that the missions themselves, due to being based on real events, can be counted as story. Now, you should know me by this point if you've been a subscriber for any length of time to know I love me some history behind my games. And I will be going over the true events behind this game, but because, and I'll be frank here, I don't love Road to Hill 30's actual story, you can simplify the plot quite a bit. Okay, Road to Hill 30 is based on the real story of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. This was one of many platoons who were dropped behind German lines hours prior to Operation Neptune, or D-Day, and the game structures itself around the events of Mission Albany in particular. A lot of this information I'll be going over in more detail during the history segment. Now, the events we are partaking in are based in reality, but our characters we get to know are that of fiction. We play as Sergeant Matthew Baker, a new replacement squad commander after the previous leader died, and he commands a squad of 13. The game begins in chaos. Our squad is both outnumbered and outgunned at the Battle of Bloody Gulch, and the squad's radio man, Leggett, is frantically requesting tank support or reinforcements, but before any can arrive, our predicament quickly worsens when a panzer tank appears and fires at us. Baker is knocked down by the blast, and while we come in and out of seeing our attempted resuscitation, Baker loses consciousness. This was just a flash forward though, as when we come to, we're all the way back at the initial jump off in the hours prior to the Normandy landings. Our plane is hit by anti-aircraft fire whilst we are preparing to drop, and Baker is thrown from the plane. Despite landing safely, we have lost our kit in the drop, and we are also well off course. But at least we've landed alive, which is more that can be said for some. From this point, the story itself is about trying to make you connect with members of your squad, but the surrounding story is again that strong history backing this game, and the objectives such as destroying anti-aircraft guns, destroying entries into Utah Beach, retaking towns and defending them, and being put in bad situations and trying to fight your way out of it. This is all well and good, and I actually love this aspect of Road to Hill 30's story, and playing historical scenarios and experiencing the story this way. What sticks out like a sore thumb though is kind of a biggie, and that's the brotherly aspect of the story. It just doesn't exist. Your brothers in arms, your unit is your family, or at least it should be, but you just don't get enough time to connect with any of these characters. Your squad mates can die in a mission and be in the next cutscene, and when characters do die in the story, I just sort of shrugged. Even Baker, who was voice acted by Troy Baker, just isn't an engaging character to play as. This element is why I'm so conflicted with this game's story. The history behind this game is engaging, and it's clear as day that Gearbox really did care about recreating these missions and objectives that were so important in regards to the success of D-Day. But the actual story they created with these characters doesn't have the impact it should, in my opinion. It has some moments that have a little something, like Leggett screaming at the top of his lungs for Baker's help and seeing this. But even this would have had a greater impact if I knew who had died. I think a big reason why this is such a problem is tied to the game's pacing, which I'll go over more in the gameplay segment, but you just don't get any time to spend with anyone. Short little cutscenes mission to mission isn't enough to build a bond, especially when you feel like someone just watching an interaction rather than participating in it. With a title like Brothers in Arms, I want to care about these guys. I really do, because the events you partake in should build your relationship. But when I barely hear someone talk, or someone dies I knew for a mission or two, it's just too hard to try and care. Maybe I'm alone in this feeling, but do you get what I'm saying? You can't just have your characters say they care for each other and have me automatically care. You have to build up to it. But overall, when you include the historical story into the equation, I'd say overall it hits a lot of the goals it set out to achieve quite well. It just doesn't nail that emotion I expect to feel. I know with my issues with the story, you may expect me to bring up this game's ending. Yes, it's a little abrupt, but it does make sense given the history, and that's the end of this operation, not the war. With the history so integral to Road to Hill 30 and the Brothers in Arms series in general, there was no way I could leave out talking about the real history behind this game. As I said, Gearbox really did take great care in representing as many facts and true life events as possible, and even went as far to spend an entire year of Road to Hill 30's development primarily focused on researching this regiment and division and its history through files, photos and documents pulled from the archives, and visiting the actual locations and sites in Normandy as well. So let's go over briefly what the 502nd PIR and the 101st Airborne Division are, and then we'll go over what they were doing during World War II, in particular obviously during D-Day. Alright, so the 101st Airborne Division, also known as Screaming Eagles, is a division within the United States Army that specialize in air assault operations to this day. The 101st is quite a famous division within the United States Army, and for good reason. They've been a part of some iconic battles in US history, but today we're focusing on their involvement in Operation Overlord, or the Battle of Normandy. As I've stated, the 101st Airborne Division led the way on D-Day, dropping the night before the invasion, leaving from the Royal Air Force Station in North Witham, England. This is where they were training with the 82nd Airborne Division, and this operation involving the 101st was titled Mission Albany. Their objectives were to secure the exits behind Utah Beach. Utah Beach was a code name for one of the 5 sectors of the D-Day invasions, and this was done to ensure those on the beach had an exit point. The division was also tasked with numerous other objectives, but let's focus on the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment. The 502nd was established shortly after America entered World War II, once again a regiment within the US Army, and was immediately assigned to the 101st. Now, there was a lot of divisions and regiments in the 101st for the invasion of Normandy, and they all had different drop zones. The 502nd was assigned Drop Zone Able, or A, the first wave of drops, and whilst in reality the 502nd dropped as a compact unit, they did drop on the wrong drop zone. Not only did the 502nd take part in securing the exits for Utah Beach, but they also cleared out Objective XYZ in order to set up an, albeit thin, line of defense from Fakarville to Buzzerville. I apologize for my pronunciations. Once again, the Aussie accent struggles with basic English, let alone other languages. Along with capturing the town in Carrollton, to name some of the big events. However, whilst we experience it in-game, from my research, the 502nd don't appear to be at the Battle of Bloody Gulch. Future Jimmy here. Just wanted to stop by to say this is a perfect example of why I'm not a history expert and just someone who loves history, because I was so focused on seeing other divisions listed at the Battle of Bloody Gulch, I missed reading that yes, the 502nd were in fact there. Just figured I'd correct that mistake before this video was done and dusted. Although it is damn well depicted in-game regardless. Now, obviously, it's rather difficult to fact check every single detail and background check everything. I mean, I'm just one man, and if I want to get videos out more regularly, I can't dedicate endless time to comparing the actual history and road to Hill 30. However, what I do know is that whilst the 502nd may not have been a part of everything depicted in-game, and some details may have been changed, this is a pretty amazing effort in depicting history in gaming. First of all, in World War II, because of its grand scale, there are so many units and divisions that are yet to be properly explored, and especially for me, not being an American, I didn't have much of a clue about either the 101st or the 502nd. I mean, why would I? You think I've seen Band of Brothers or something? I really should, I know. But I'm glad I got to experience a game from their perspective, and seeing the true history compared to locations you visit in-game, it's really appreciated, and you notice that sort of care. Look, while I may not love everything about this game, it's hard to fault the team's care and pursuit to replicate real history. Well, after sucking the game off for a minute there, we're back to reality.
Oh, there goes gravity.
Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 is a first-person shooter and has the player commanding, depending on the mission, 1 or 2 teams. You have fire teams and or assault teams, along with, on occasion, a tank. The fire team's main focus is to occupy the enemy's attention with suppressive fire. The assault team can do the same, but is better for flanking the enemy whilst pinned down. And, well, tanks are tanks, they blow shit up. I actually really enjoy the squad-based mechanics quite a lot, as 1, it mixes things up from my typical experience in FPSs, and 2, it means you need to pay attention to a lot more in order to be successful. You need to make sure your units are in cover, suppressing and flanking when possible, make sure they can actually see the enemy, all along with making sure you are being intelligent and moving around when safe and flanking the enemy yourself. The squad commands are solid, and whilst it isn't the most complex system, it still presents a good level of strategy and thinking involved from engagement to engagement. My biggest issue with the game's core mechanics though is a pretty big one for a first-person shooter. I don't know about you, but when I have an enemy in my sights in a first-person shooter, I kinda want them to die, and that just isn't always the case here. Now, initially when I realized this issue, I thought it was tied to the game's suppressing and flanking system, making enemies weak, and the reason my guns didn't seem to do much was just because I was rushing into fights. But through playing the game more, that didn't seem to be the case, and so the end result makes the shooting feel like a bit of a dice roll. And since this isn't Fallout or an RPG, yeah, that's not what you want. It's just inconsistent. Sometimes it works as intended, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes enemies go down, no worries. Other times you shoot first and also die first. I mean, a Thompson point blank should be a quick kill, but more often than not, I just ended up dead and restarting at the checkpoint, which is a little frustrating. This inconsistency paired with the constant sway whilst aiming, it just doesn't make for a fun first-person shooter, and has you using your squad just to feel like you're affecting the battle. By far the most consistent weapon is the sniper rifle. It's a great time to use, it's accurate, a one-shot kill, and just feels so good to use in comparison to other weapons. I don't know what would have been so hard to replicate this weapon's success for the others. On a somewhat lesser note, the AI isn't too flash either. In some regards though, this is actually a good thing, that being the enemies, since the shooting isn't always spot on. But the issue I have more so lies with your squad. Now, for the most part, they're fine, but when you get to situations where the cover isn't large enough or they don't move where you tell them to, it can again be frustrating because they do die and rather quickly, which if this happens early in a chapter, it means you're already on the back foot. The AI also likes to hound you with the same callouts over and over again. It's not a massive issue, but it can be a source of frustration which you don't want. Whilst I have also praised the historical accuracy throughout this video, it is again what I would consider a problem at times, mainly in regard to Road to Hill 30's pacing. This doesn't just affect the game's story, there needs to be a break in the gameplay from time to time to try and halt repetition from setting in. I understand that the history may dictate that there wasn't these breaks in combat that a game would require, but also it is a game. It's good to take a chill pill from time to time, but instead we just have non-stop battles with Germans from start to finish, And this resulted in shorter play sessions from me because it quickly becomes repetitious. Also, I have to point this mission out. Rommel's Asparagus is a weak gameplay mission, I'll be honest. Going around destroying poles, it's not great. But that's enough negativity. I'm sure it sounds like I was miserable playing Road to Hill 30. But I honestly wasn't. I know, I just raw dogged this game, but I really did have a good time. I can just acknowledge the issues I also had with this game. It's a flawed product in my opinion. Not a bad one though. The missions themselves, whilst following the same gameplay loop, are filled with different scenarios to conquer. Whether it be an MG nest, tanks, Germans at all possible angles. Is it an ambush? Do you need to think of a plan of attack on the fly? Maybe there are mortars dropping, anti-tank weapons in use, or all of the above. Whatever the situation may be, it's a good time to put your squad commander hat on, make sure everyone is where they need to be, and head off and flank the enemy. You really need to move together as a unit. You need to cover your allies like they do for you, and look out for enemies that will destroy your units with ease. When you pair this gameplay with the true-to-life historical environments, it really does transport you to the 1940s and Normandy itself. This game is also no joke in terms of challenge, and you'll be put in your place quickly if you don't watch your flanks or get too cocky. And when it's fair, again, the Thompson incident, it adds that great stress element which I appreciate. Plus, Road to Hill 30 passes the Saving Private Ryan test, which is, if you give me a sniper in a tower with tanks surrounding me, I better feel like Private Jackson, and I did, bar how that ended. Unfortunately, as much as I do love the history behind this game, and I love that Gearbox wanted to separate themselves from the pack with Brothers in Arms, the history and pursuit of realism can hinder Road to Hill 30 in a couple of areas of gameplay. The gameplay just has flaws, no question, but it can also hook you in just as easily. Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 is one of those games I both absolutely love and yet also find a lot of issues that stick out like a sore thumb. I'm also fully aware that I may be outside popular opinion in some of my feelings, which I'm okay with. It's just one man's opinion, not fact. When I look at this game as a package, there really is a lot to love about it. Again, I had fun with Road to Hill 30, but I feel like if I wasn't so engaged by the history, that would be a little different. I find this game can quite easily grab your attention and not make you want to stop playing. But the issues, whilst they may appear lesser on their own, when you pair the lack of character development, hit and miss shooting, wonky AI, and no real breaks to pace the game even a little, it can all seem like a lot, and it was just one of those games for me where once you notice one thing, it sort of just snowballs. So, do I recommend you play Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 today? That's a question I honestly am unsure about because it depends on you. Again, I honestly feel alone with my opinion on this game, and maybe that's because the premise is so incredible, I felt in some ways let down by the final product. But there is some serious fun to be had here, and I'm sure I'll say this by the end of this series of retrospectives, but Road to Hill 30 in particular, in my opinion, has so much untapped potential that a full-blown remake could be amazing. But for now, I'm just praying I can return to my more positive self for the rest of this series, because I didn't expect this video to go this way. But I guess we don't have long to wait and see for ourselves. Until then though, this has been my Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30 retrospective.